Hey, thanks for tuning in again. I just wanted to show what my Outrun machine ended up looking like after it was all said and done. I still want to add in some T-molding and maybe eventually clean up that pedal a little bit. Little tiny things here and there, but for the most part, I got all the main things done. The biggest thing that needed to be done was the circuit board needed to be fixed. I sold most of my circuit boards and actually bought a new Smarty Pi board, which was a direct replacement for that. It is emulation, but it's an actual full board. To show a better picture of it later, but it's an actual full board. Let me see if I can turn on the light. Yeah. It's an actual full board, so I had to plug in a Raspberry Pi 4, but it's got all the settings there. You can run only certain kinds of games, like that uses this similar engine from Sega. It's been a while, so I'm not sure about the engine exactly, but yeah, so I wired it all up in there. Still need to clean out that at some point. That'll need to get fixed at some point, but actually, it works, but I'll have to replace the power supply at some point. But yeah, so that was the Smarty Pi board. That was the main thing to fix, was that. So thankfully got a new one in. It can play multiple games, and I can switch to them. I'll get to that in a second. At some point I want to get a regular Outrun marquee, but Turbo Outrun's good for now because this machine was originally, or not originally, but when I got it, it was a Turbo Outrun back in, it's probably 10 years ago now I got this thing. But it took me 8 years to actually get it to a playable state. So the screen was missing the color red. Thanks to my friend Joe, he let me have one of his monitors. Tested a whole bunch of his. Found ones that were working and ones that weren't, and said this one was working. And then he said I could have it, which was awesome. And then my next thing I really wanted to get was they put in a third-party steering wheel in here, and it didn't shake at all. In fact, it was missing everything. So on eBay years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago, I got this whole, not the whole thing, but a lot of this steering wheel assembly, not this plastic part for some reason, with the steering wheel. Actually, no, it didn't even come with the steering wheel, but it was the dashboard minus this plastic, but it had all the metal stuff in the background. Had all of that there, and gave me something to work with, gave me extra parts to work with. And then just a couple years ago, once I found this Smarty Pi board, it inspired me to fully get this thing serviced up again now that I had a working board. So I went out, talked to my friend Joe. He had a CRT monitor, got that put in. Before that, I was running a VGA LCD screen in there. Thought that I might just deal with that for now, but I'm so glad I opted to finally get a CRT in there. I mean, that's what I wanted all along, but I just didn't think I'd ever be able to get one to put in there. Now I did. And yeah, and then my next goal was get a shaking steering wheel. I really thought I'd never be able to do this, but thanks to another friend of mine, Brian, he hooked me up with a connection to this guy named Brandon, and he was able to get me more of the parts that I needed. So now I have multiple parts of these of of these actually now, and that's my spare, like an extra shield thing that goes around this if I'd ever need it. It just came with it. And then had a different shifter. The original one had a different shifter. So basically I had to put all this in, had to get the shaking steering wheel thing working. I had to 3D print with my 3D printer. I had to 3D print like 3 new gears or so. But I ended up only using 1 or 2. I think maybe even just 1. It was just like the one main one I had to fix that made it so I could actually turn. And it was a tiny one too. Let me see. There's like another one I kind of printed too. This one actually only printed half, but this was the stuff I kind of made. It was supposed to go longer. I can't even use this because there's no hole in it, but it was this same material though. I printed on this machine, or I think my other one. Oh, here. This is actually, I think it was a spare. This was basically the gear that I printed. And you know, until you got 3D printers, like not many people, you know, like had like spare parts of these, but now you got 3D printers, you know, now there's so many things you can now repair, thankfully. And, I had to use non-PLA filament. I had to use like harder PET G filament I use, which still isn't that great, but it's PLA. It would have broken 2 seconds, but yeah, so I was able to get this working. Had to buy some new springs from Lowe's. Springs made it so you can actually spin this wheel, because there's another guy on eBay wanted like $80 for the springs, but I just sized him out and went to Lowe's and picked up like a couple of new ones for $10 or whatever, and how that works. Bought this little cover thing off eBay. It's definitely not like the original, but it's better than nothing. Just had to hot glue it on there. And then to switch games, I 3D printed this as well. And I bought this button off Amazon, but I had to 3D print this little shrouding here so it wouldn't look awful. I took one of these out. This is a fully working coin mechanism in here, but now I got a credit button, which this game I'm running right now doesn't really need it, but I want to be careful opening this up, but actually I'm going to leave it alone. Yeah, I'm kind of messing it up. But yeah, so, and then to switch games, I wired in this button here, which actually was pretty easy. I saw in the background there was just like 2 ends, and that was the service button I would hit to normally switch games. So I just wired that service button up to the front where there normally a lock button, an actual lock key would be. Yeah, and so now I'm able to switch games on it. So this is running the enhanced Outrun Cannonball game, which is like 60 frames a second Outrun, which it looks horrible on this iPhone right now that I'm recording on, because you can't record CRT screens on a phone too easily. But it looks perfect in real life. So I'm going to switch games here, pressing this once. And so that game I actually had the shaking motor working. Oh, and now this is original Outrun. It's at 30 frames a second. You can notice it's a little choppy potentially. I'm going to switch to this game. And then this one is Turbo Outrun, which is extremely awesome that I can get it, because I had the original board for this. It worked when I first got it, and then it stopped working about a week later, or if that. This board is very, very expensive. If you want to get a working Turbo Outrun board, it's around $1,000, or at least at the time of making this video it was. I sold mine broken for like $300 or something. At $200 to $300, I sold mine broken. So that tells you how much these things are worth. So I'm super happy now I can play Turbo Outrun. However, this game, it is fun, but it's not as fun as Outrun in my opinion. But it is fun. You can I can turn on the shakingness of it, which is, it's not just like an on-off switch. You have to actually go into the settings and say this is a cockpit or this is an upright or whatever. It was one of those settings I had to do in MAME, because this is actually running on MAME. And once I did that, then it turned the shaking steering wheel on. But this game is pretty much impossible to use that game, like to use the shaking. You could do it for a little bit, but it's going to break your whole steering wheel mechanism after a while, unless it's a brand new machine. Because in Outrun, you try to avoid this steering wheel shaking. But in Turbo Outrun, you can't avoid it, because there's stuff that's on the road, like water and stuff. Like, I think that would maybe make your steering wheel shake, but later on, there's a lot of stuff on the road, and you can't avoid it at all. So it's just constantly shaking the whole time, and it will actually shake the whole machine. It's so violent. Like, that would have shook the whole machine if the game was going. So I turned it off, because I myself fully repaired this thing. I had to take this whole metal thing apart, clean it all up, wire everything in, sand it down, put a new shaking motor in here. It was an ordeal. It was quite the ordeal. Labor of love, but it was very much a big ordeal. So, I mean, I can turn on for a little bit, but it's going to mostly stay off for that game, even though it is fun. But I just don't want to break the shaking steering wheel. So, I'll show the next game. The next one, and there's hopefully more games coming in the future, but this is one the guy who made the Smarty Pie board wired in so far. Power Drift, this also has a shaking steering wheel option, which is awesome. You can avoid the shakiness, but it will constantly shake, but it's not, I don't play this game that often, so I feel like I can go ahead and just turn it on for that one. Let's see, for this game, Outrunners, it's one player only. This one does not shake, unfortunately. There's no option to make it. Maybe that'll change in the future. But that's a fun game to even have on here. You have to have the option to play it. Let me see here. This is like Chase HQ or something. This is a really fun game. No shaking steering wheel works on this, but even if I want it to, but it's a really fun game. In some of these games, I have to hit the credit button. So some of them have free play built in. Some of them I have to do a credit thing. So that's why this exists. So I'm going to do, let's credit up. So what was this? Big Run maybe or something? Or no, this is Top Speed. That shows it works. Yeah, no shaking the steering wheel on that one. Okay. Grand Prix. This one I can turn on the shaking steering wheel part, but when the game first starts up, it's like revving the engine, and then the steering wheel is shaking so violently, the whole machine is shaking. I thankfully figured out how to turn that off by going into the MAME settings and saying, no, this is like an upright machine or something, and then it eventually turned off. It was one of those settings. Even the guy who made the Smarty Pie board didn't know that with this setting, so he thanked me for that. So he said from now on, when people download his software, when he loads it on other people's, it'll be turned off by default, but that's how you turn it back on. So, and I mean, I love the shaking steering wheel, don't get me wrong. I spent tons and tons of times fixing it. I just don't want it to break again immediately. I'm trying to avoid that. Especially if I'm not here. Like like if it was going a lot, I would just stop playing that game. But if there's like, my kids are playing this a lot, I don't know how long they're going to leave the game on. Maybe they'd leave it on and leave the room. I don't know. So like, it just kind of scared the hell out of me. Or if I, brought this thing, Continental Circus, that's fun. If I brought this game to like a venue or something, hell yeah, I'm turning it off. If I brought this thing to a venue, I might just unplug the shaker motor. Like that's like obviously the nuke option, which it would be really easy to do that, but then you'd have to take all those parts off, or maybe go up to the circuit board in the back to unplug it. But I don't want to constantly do that for each game. But I would probably do that for if I brought it to a venue, just to avoid them breaking it. Le Mans, let me And then I put Space Harrier on here just to see what would happen. But oh, this is the big run though. That's a fun game too. But it's just impossible with the way I have it. I think somebody said they got it working. So this one has the shakiness. I need to take that one off. So that's what I'm talking about with the shakiness. But one of my friends who has the same Smarty Pie board, who's able to play the game a little bit using the shifter and the steering wheel. But I think you fire with the start button. So unless you have the start button on the shifter, I think it's impossible to play unless I have 3 arms. So I just need to take it off the machine. But I just thought it was funny to have it on. But yeah, so that's my Turbo Outrun machine. Super glad I finally got it working. I have like 3 or 4 videos on this machine on this channel. One of which was like 5 or 7 years ago where I thought I got the machine working again. I had somebody extremely generous sold me like a semi-working board for 20 bucks, and I Frankensteined it with one of my boards because it was like a sandwich board, like 2 circuit boards on top, and it was like the bottom board was broken on all of them. Maybe it was the top board. I think it was the top board is broken on all of them. But that didn't work. And then I did another video last year where it was fully working, but the CRT monitor wasn't put in yet, and I might not have even had this installed yet. But this is it in its working state. I got this side panel. It was like half missing. The car is completely gone. I got that side panel on discount from a arcade graphics website for like 30 bucks. Normally it's like 100 something. I realized that the air was, there's like some bad Photoshop files floating around where people just, to make it on both sides, they just reverse it in Photoshop. And so now they have this guy on the wrong side of the car because it's not in England, this car. So he should be on the other side of the car. That's what I assume somebody had a problem with because they were only selling the right panel. But I thought, you know what, screw it. He's in Europe on this side, and he's in England on this side, and he's in America on the other. So, like, I don't care. Yeah, I loved it for the price because I needed to save some money where I could. So, and this is the original one that came there with the machine, and it was eventually converted to a Turbo Outrun. And it was stopped service in 1997, North Carolina. So, super glad I got it fully working now. Eventually going to try to change this marquee out and maybe the T-molding, maybe to red or something, or maybe just black again. I don't know. But very glad to finally have it. I really wanted to make this video just to show that I did fully restore it, or pretty much fully restore it. I actually had sparks fly earlier because this cable was unplugged down here and it was getting pulled on, and so a couple of the wires were missing, so sparks were literally flying. I was super scared. I broke the machine. I just had to unscrew this and take it apart again and fix that. So thankfully it's working now. I wired it all up correctly now. So, but yeah, so that's my Outrun machine. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it.